Welcome, and thank you all for joining us for this special Rare Cancer Day Lunch and Learn webinar. Rare Cancer Day was created in 2018 through the joint efforts of TargetCancer CEO Jim Palma, rare cancer advocate John Hopper, and the National Organization for Rare Disorders. This day was created to recognize the unique challenges that come with a rare cancer diagnosis and has now grown into an international day of awareness. We are very proud to highlight Rare Cancer Day through this webinar and with our two expert panelists. I'm Kristen Palma, the president of Target Cancer Foundation. Before we get started, I just wanted to give a brief background about Target Cancer. We were founded in 2009 by my late husband, Paul, who was diagnosed at 38 with cholangiocarcinoma. Being a healthy new dad diagnosed at such a young age was shocking, but learning the cancer was rare and that there was no real understanding of the cancer or a clear plan for treatment was terrifying. That experience led Paul to start Target Cancer Foundation to focus on rare cancer research. And here we are 15 years later, having given over $2 million in rare cancer research. We created TRACK, our precision medicine clinical trial, and much, much more. I'm especially excited for today's webinar because one of the hardest part of our family's experience was feeling completely isolated with no clear sense of what to do after Paul was diagnosed. What we didn't realize is that this is the common experience of a rare cancer patient. We hear this all the time. In response, we've recently created educational resources that you can find on our website to help patients and caregivers navigate a new diagnosis. Today, we are focusing our discussion around one of those resources called Initial Steps After Diagnosis. And we're lucky enough to have patient advocate Dana Deighton and Dr. Mina Nikanjam joining us today to discuss those steps and how patients and their doctors can and should work together to navigate a rare cancer diagnosis. So I'm going to let Dana and Dr. Nikanjam introduce themselves. Dana, why don't we start with you?
Great. Thank you, Kristen. It's so nice to be here. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dana Deighton, and I am a stage 4 esophageal cancer survivor. I was diagnosed in 2013 and sort of went through quite the diagnostic odyssey to get there. So to me, esophageal cancer, especially at the age of 43 when I was diagnosed, seemed quite rare because the doctors that I saw were looking at other more likely malignancies like breast and lung and ovarian, and it took a long time to get the real diagnosis. And by the time that I did, I had to really hurry up and figure out what I was going to do, select the right oncology team, put together questions and things like that. And I felt rather alone out there, like Kristen said. So because I feel so fortunate to have made it to the other side, I really want to pay it forward, and I'm a very active advocate and even work in the rare cancer space. I work at the Melanoma Research Alliance, and of course, in that discipline, we have a number of rare cancers like uveal, acral, mucosal melanomas, and they often go uncaught until it's too late, just like esophageal cancer and many others that we'll probably talk about today. So can't wait to have this discussion with everybody. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Dana. Okay, Dr. Nikanjam.
So my name is Mina Nikanjam. I'm a medical oncologist at the University of California, San Diego. I see patients in clinic regularly, and I also do clinical research in precision medicine. I have worked in the precision medicine clinic and the rare cancer clinics at UC San Diego. I enrolled many patients on our personalized medicine trial at UC San Diego, the iPredict clinical trial, and currently I'm involved in the TRACK study, personalized medicine study, where I'm co-PI and a molecular tumor board member.
Thank you. So just to get our conversation started, we were going to bring up the Initial Steps After Diagnosis resource so that you can see it, but it will also be highlighted in the chat for easy access. Okay, so there it is. And to get started, the first step that we recommend is biomarker testing for your rare tumor. There are very unique challenges that come with a rare cancer diagnosis, as we know. And one is a lack of understanding and sometimes even misdiagnosis. So this step is really critical. Dr. Nikanjam, I was wondering if you could talk about what biomarker testing is and why it's so important for a rare cancer.
So When we talk about biomarker testing, every cancer has certain drivers for growth. We call these mutations, molecular alterations. These all mean the same thing. Basically, for a cancer to grow, certain stop signs on a cell growth have to be broken down. So it's important to understand what is driving the cancer to grow. And we have many therapies that have been developed or are under development, which we can use to block these pathways of cancer growth. But if we don't know what the pathways are, we can't really do anything. So this biomarker testing, another form, we call it next generation sequencing. A lot of times these are done by companies, Foundation, Tempus, Caris, and then some institutions have an internal testing panel. Usually these are different genes, cancer genetics. So usually they look at 300 to 500 different genes and see how if any of them are changed in the cancer as compared to the normal tissue. Because rare tumors are so rare, a lot of times the standard of care is either not very good or just hasn't been tested in a lot of people. So looking for different ways to treat these by looking at the biomarkers and the actual genetics of the cancer can be very helpful for physicians trying to figure out what's the best treatment possible. Because a lot of times the current quote standard either doesn't work or it's just there is no standard for some of these very rare cancers.
Thank you. So if a doctor isn't suggesting this or bringing this up right away, how can a patient approach their doctor and feel comfortable approaching their doctor to suggest how important this is?
I think it's important to bring these things up to the doctor and just say, I was wondering if we could do molecular profiling or do next generation sequencing on my cancer. Many of these for advanced or metastatic cancers are now FDA approved. So if you have at least stage 3 cancer, your insurance will pay for it. So, and a lot of times if insurance doesn't pay, there are great financial assistance programs. So the very wealthy have trouble getting these paid for, but most people, they can make it a reasonable several $100s or less out of pocket to get these tests done. And I think just discussing with the doctor that this is really important. Most doctors just want to help their patients, and with a rare tumor, they're looking for ideas. So most doctors, if something comes up, oh, I think getting next generation sequencing, getting a molecular profile, getting biomarker testing, can we do this? Most doctors will want to try to help.
That's really helpful. Thank you. And I think that leads into the next step, which talks about another challenge that rare cancer patients face, which is that doctors may not be familiar with their rare cancer and how important it is to seek out second opinions and to find someone who has seen their rare tumor and is also familiar with something like biomarker testing. Dana, I know your experience exemplifies how important it is to get a second opinion. So I thought maybe we could talk about how your experience was doing that. And then also, Dr. Nikanjam, how doctors feel when patients ask for a second opinion or go for a second opinion. So I thought we'd have a conversation about that.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So when I was finally diagnosed with esophageal cancer, I was being seen at a community health organization. And, I didn't know what I didn't know then. And I very quickly learned that my oncologist, as wonderful as a person as he may have been, also didn't know what he didn't know. But the fact of the matter was, he didn't see many rare cancers. He saw a lot of breast and a lot of, lung and just more pervasive normal cancers. But what he hadn't seen was esophageal cancer in a 43-year-old woman. And to be honest, even a lot of oncologists at academic centers hadn't seen it because this disease usually is more seen in men that are over 65 who have indulged in things like smoking, drinking, bad diets. They have very clear symptoms like, trouble swallowing and heartburn. I didn't have any of those. And so that's one reason the diagnostic journey persisted as long as it did. But it's also the reason that I was told by my community oncologist to just quickly get my affairs in order and enjoy my kids because I probably had less than a year. And I knew that that couldn't be right. And in this situation, I felt like even though physicians were saying there's no data really to help you beyond some chemo and palliative care, I feel like the dearth of data was actually hurting me because I wasn't even in that data. There was nobody like me. And so I finally figured out quickly that I needed to get to academic centers that saw rather high volumes of this disease. That also kind of exposed another fact, and that's that most cancer centers, academic or not, really are just not seeing, what I had in my population. So it was a big translation problem for a while. So I actually shopped around. I went to about 5 academic centers on the East Coast, pushing hard, looking for options. Sadly, I wasn't really getting, much better advice than I had already heard from the community oncologist until I finally found one where I felt like they saw more health in me than cancer. They realized that I was young and healthy in other ways. And, they were really willing to take this on and, um, do all of the genetic testing and kind of look under, different rocks and just understand my biology, and its uniqueness a little bit more than what other, organizations seem to be willing to do. So for me, pursuing, not just a second opinion, but a third, fourth, and fifth really made all the difference in the world, because if I had stopped at 2, I am pretty certain I would not be here right now. So I really encourage people to do that and advocate for themselves.
Which is not an easy thing to do when you're going through something like this and exhausted and tired and scared.
Mhm,
But I think you bring up such an important point about being seen for the health in you and
mhm.
for who you are, because and finding someone who you feel comfortable with and feel is listening and seeing you. And sometimes just, you can trust your instinct and really see where that connection is. And it sounds like you took a long path to get there, but I'm so glad you did.
Yeah, no, thank you for saying that. One thing that I tell patients, and I speak to them almost every day, trying to help people get on a path, you definitely can't do this alone. So you have got to find people that are on your team, and you need to feel it. So if you're not feeling it, you need to keep looking.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And how, Dr. Nikanjam, does it feel as a practitioner, to know that patients are going to different doctors? If you've seen someone and then they tell you they want to see someone else, do you have any tips for patients about how to feel comfortable doing that and having that conversation?
Yeah, I'll say for my patients, I encourage them all, if it's something rare, to get a second opinion, even if it's something that I have seen before and have seen a couple cases. If it's rare, you want to know what the latest stuff out there is. And I always try to get my own patient's second opinion. So I present at the tumor board. I talk to my colleagues if something unusual comes in the door, just to make sure there's not something that I've missed. Because sometimes someone was at a meeting, heard something new and exciting that I wasn't at that meeting. So I want to make sure I have all the information available. And I do encourage my patients that please get a second opinion if you'd feel more comfortable. I'm willing to work with you and the second opinion doctor to implement whatever they want to do, or if you feel more comfortable transferring so that other doctor can take care of you. I'm here for you. Whatever makes the most sense for you, whatever you feel the most comfortable with. So I have a number of patients who are getting regular second opinions, and for some of them, we're talking together saying, okay, the second opinion said this. What do you actually want to do? And some of them, I just do exactly what the second opinion says. And a few of them have transferred to the second opinion doctor. I think it's very important. And as a patient, if you have a situation where your primary oncologist is close to home, the second opinion's far away, you really want to make sure your primary oncologist is on your team and will partner with you in care and doesn't really have an ego that's saying, no, I'm not going to do what that other person says. They need to do what's best for you, and they need to be on your team and working with you, and you're champion. And sometimes I have patients that come and the second opinion hasn't gotten back to them and they've progressed. So then I'm the one that is reaching out to call the second opinion and leave the messages and get the information back and talk doctor to doctor. Because most patients do a good job of recording, taking notes, but sometimes there's nuances they don't understand because you're sick. There's a lot of information coming out there. So for me to hear it directly from the doctor, sometimes that's very helpful for the patient as well. So I think it's important to get second opinions. And if your doctor doesn't like you getting second opinions, think very carefully, is this really the doctor who you want taking care of you? I will say one caveat. I had one recently where they had two second opinions and they were arguing with each other. They did not agree with the next course of action. So I sat down with the patient. I said, look, I think there are many ways to go here. Who do you want to go with? What do you want to do next? I don't think either answer is wrong. And patient said, well, I like the guy from Cedars better than your colleague at UCSD. It's like, okay, we'll go with that. So, and that may change throughout the course of treatment, that the patient may, oh, I don't want to go with this guy with Cedars, let me go with the other one. So as long as there's nothing clearly wrong with that opinion that I can see, if there's many different ways to go, I think at the end of the day, it's the patient's opinion. I give them my opinion as well. And then we together make a plan for how we're going to manage and what the next steps are.
Yep, that's fantastic. And that's really, I think, the best case scenario with a practitioner is someone like you who will encourage that and listen and really create a plan together with the patient. I mean, I think that's just so important. And like Dana was saying too, just trusting your instincts and who you feel comfortable with, but in conjunction with your doctor. We did get a question about this. I think we may have answered this, but I'll just include this question in case there's anything else either of you want to add. The question was, the most important step to take after being diagnosed with a rare cancer is to find a specialist with knowledge and experience treating the rare cancer. This is challenging because there are too few specialists and most diagnosing doctors don't know where to refer patients for follow-up. What do you suggest patients can do to bridge this gap? Is there anything else you would just want to add about, I think, bridging the gap to help to find those specialists for second opinions?
If the cancer indication has an advocacy group, you might try reaching out to them because they often have a lot of contact with the specialist in their field. For instance, like a rare neuroendocrine tumor, they might work with those few specialists all the time. So I would definitely encourage you to reach out to advocacy groups and network. I always tell patients and caregivers, there is an incredible power of connection. You just do not know where it will lead. And I was the beneficiary of some amazing magic on that front.
Yeah, I would add that some of these organizations, as Dana mentioned, they have a list of doctors. So, and there's people on the website. I usually recommend people go to a major academic medical center and make sure you're being seen at the university sites. I trained at UCLA. We had a lot of satellite sites. So while Ventura, Westlake Village might be closer to home, you're probably not seeing the real specialist who does the research there. They're very fine doctors, but you may not be seeing that person who's the specialist. And then take a look online. They usually put on their profile, if they're a specialist in a rare tumor, they want people to know that. So to take a look and see if that's what their area is. And when you see that second opinion, just ask them, is this your area of expertise? And just see what they say. And it may be that you need to get another second opinion if the first one doesn't know things very well. I felt very bad a couple of weeks ago. Someone was referred to me for myelodysplastic syndrome, a very rare kind. I said, I'm not a specialist in this. I can help you as best I can. And the patient got upset. They said when I called, they told me everyone here could say that. I said, that's not the case. Let me send you to someone down in La Jolla who's better. And I know billed for that visit. So I think it's important to really get down and ask, how many of these do you treat? Is this your thing? Do you do research in this area? To really ask those hard questions, which many people feel uncomfortable asking the doctor. And hopefully the doctor will be honest with you and tell you, I've only seen one of these, I've seen none of these. And then that gives the information that you need to decide on the next steps.
That's really, really important to ask those questions. And like you said, academic medical centers do tend to have specialists, who can speak to those specific diseases, but asking, how many have you seen? How many have you treated? I think, that's a really, really critical question to have in your pocket when you're meeting these doctors for the first time. So thank you. And after, we've gotten the diagnosis and you're meeting with the doctors, getting second opinions, and I think you're going through this, getting a little deeper into the experience, is when you can feel really isolated and just on your own path. And it's so important, like you were saying, Dana, to feel that you're not alone. you started to touch on this just now a bit about how important it is to find an advocacy organization that focuses on rare cancer or the rare cancer that you have. And there are so many out there. This is our third step in the initial steps after diagnosis. And I just wanted to see if you could touch a little more on and being at an advocacy foundation yourself, why it is so important to find community and advocacy groups when you're going through this experience.
Yeah, thank you. So I feel like I had to learn this like the hard way and on my own, even though my mom actually died of colon cancer. It was, sort of before the internet is what we know it as today. So my research skills didn't get honed in time to help her. And, I never expected to be in a situation similar to hers. However, I learned a lot from that. And I learned that I had to quickly do my own research and create a list of questions. And I looked high and low everywhere. I told people about my diagnosis. I didn't care if they were an allergist or, a pulmonologist. It didn't matter. I told everybody because you just don't know what they might know or who they might know, in their network. I also really sought other patients like me, but as I mentioned earlier, at that time, and maybe even still now, there really just weren't that many patients like me because I was such an outlier. However, they are out there. There are people. And these days, there are online communities for people with certain health conditions like Inspire and Patients Like Me, and some advocacy groups even have their own chat groups and things like that. So it's going to take a little work, but there are places, where you will find that connectivity and where you can ask questions of people that have walked the path that you're on. And, asking your doctor is one thing, that's great. But the fact of the matter is, you usually only have maybe 15 minutes in clinic and you're nervous. There's an agenda for that appointment. You might not to get to ask all of your questions. So I encourage you to find others so that you can be well armed for the appointments. But even if you don't get everything, accomplished, you might be able to bounce some of those questions off of others. Advocacy groups, again, are super great resources for your particular diagnosis because they go really deep on what you need to know, what you need to ask, where the pitfalls are, maybe what some of the new, research and treatments might be. And you can take that back to your medical oncologist and say, look, I read about this. Tell me more. I need to know if I'm a good candidate. Have we done genetic testing for this? Do I fall into this category? Am I MSI high, which might make me, a better recipient for immunotherapy or another, drug? So that really does empower you and it keeps the dialogue in your court. I don't think any patient, really ever wants to be told, what to do without having a voice in the process.
Yeah. I can say the landscape has changed so much in these years that we've been doing this work and since my husband Paul was diagnosed, and to see the amount of advocacy groups and the communities that come out of these groups is pretty amazing. Here at Target Cancer Foundation, it wasn't what we set out to do at all. We were really focused on research, and through the years, this amazing community of patients and families have come together, and that support too is so meaningful, and it's really something that I think is such a positive step. You think of all the negatives of the internet, but like you were saying, this is where it can really, really help during these situations. So thank you. Our last step, I just wanted to, and this, I think there's a lot to this one. So I think you both, I'm going to have you both talk about it, but is really creating a treatment roadmap. So I think this is critical for rare cancer patients, obviously, because it is so difficult to know what the plan is and things can change. but having a plan with your doctor and knowing that there are clinical trials out there, knowing what those are, what happens when something changes, that is really an important step. And I just wanted to see, Dr. Nikanjam, if you could talk a little bit about that. And also, Dana, you too, when you're talking about clinical trials and why they're so important for rare cancer patients and how sometimes participation in those trials can actually lead to a standard of care treatment later on, which is, I think, what happened with you, Dana. So maybe we can just, have a conversation about this last step, and then we'll go from there with some questions that have come in.
Yeah, I think I can mention that when someone with a rare tumor comes into my clinic, in addition to me doing my literature search, talking to my colleagues, I present them in the tumor board, we order our molecular testing. I usually sit down and talk about 3 potential options for treatment to start. So first one is there any standard of care? Usually this is chemo. Most people don't want to do chemo. Are there any clinical trials? The tricky thing with trials is most of them are institution specific. So most of them, if it's not open at UCSD, I don't really know that much about the trials going on at other places. So that's when the second opinion at places nearby becomes very important. And depending on where a patient lives, it can be hard. If you're in the middle of Midwest, rural area with not a lot of academic medical centers around, it can be hard to find a big institution with trials. If you're in a large center, Los Angeles, there's a ton of places around USC, UCLA, City of Hope, where you can get a bunch of opinions and have access to a lot of trials. So we talk about clinical trials as an option, and I look at what's available. There's the benefit of the TRACK study is it's remote, so you can do it from any site. And then the other one I talk about, because I'm at UC San Diego, getting the testing for biomarkers. We had the iPredict clinical trial, and we're still doing this, where we take treatments based on those mutations, the changes on the tumor, and give patients matched therapy. So drugs that will block those specific mutations or changes. And we're still able to do this at UC San Diego. I don't know if other doctors outside can do that without guidance from a precision medicine expert, but those are the 3 options I outlined to patients. And one important thing in the treatment roadmap is asking, how urgent is it that I start treatment? Some people who come in really, really sick, their livers are failing, they've got a lot of disease, they're really sick. You always want to get a second opinion, but you may not have time to get a lot of second opinions or even to get on a trial. You might have to start something right away with the thought that, well, let's get the disease shrunk a little and then we can get on to something better. If you're otherwise feeling well, healthy, your labs don't show anything, just the scan showed cancer, the biopsy showed that, we know you have some time. You have some weeks. You don't want to wait 6 months to start treatment, but waiting 4 to 6 weeks, the amount of time it takes sometimes to get the profiling back, time it takes to get on a clinical trial, you have some time. So I think it's important to talk to the doctor about how urgent is it that I start treatment. So those are the things I discuss with the patient. And then if we can get them on a trial, we try. If we can get the match therapy information back, then we can wait. If you got to start right away, sometimes you have to put them on something that you're not terribly happy about and they're not terribly happy about. And it may just be based on case reports out there, if there's not a great standard for the rare tumor. But that's kind of what goes into the initial roadmap when the patient comes to see me with a rare tumor.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Just because you mentioned TRACK, maybe could you talk just a little bit about your participation in that, just as a part of this roadmap?
So TRACK is a remote study, and my role, I'm on the molecular tumor board. So the team gets together, does an amazing job getting together all the patient histories and then the molecular profiling. And then on Thursdays, 1 to 2 my time, we sit down and we discuss each patient. What mutations do they have? What drugs make the most sense? What's the best combination therapy? A lot of these drugs that we're giving in combinations have never been given together before. So we discuss, do we give a slightly lower dose so the patient doesn't get sick? How often do we need to monitor? And we give several options for treatment. We try to prioritize if there's any great clinical trials out there, but generally it's a recommendation of giving these 2 to 4 drugs together. And the drugs that we give, they're often recommended off-label. So a patient with cholangiocarcinoma might be getting 1 therapy for breast cancer, 1 therapy for lung cancer, and 1 therapy that's approved for thyroid cancer. But that is what their tumor is telling us based on genetics that it needs to treat it and to stop those drivers of tumor growth.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, thank you. I just, and I think, what is helpful, with well, two things too, is just what you said before also about that people can enroll from anywhere. So you don't have to travel, you don't have to, you can enroll remotely, so you can stay with your treating doctor and you get a recommendation, like you were saying, that is a combination therapy, but maybe you don't need it right at that moment, but it can be part of this roadmap to have even possibly later on if your cancer progresses or something changes and you need a new therapy, that is part of you have it as part of your roadmap for the future. So thank you for bringing it up, but I think that was great. And Dana, I wanted to see, just what your thoughts were on this as well.
Yeah, so my experience was a little bit different. I did have genetic testing when I was first diagnosed, but the results were not super clear at first. It was in 2013, so we've already come a long way. There were a lot of like markers of unknown significance, but what do you do with that? How do you treat that? Um, and even though we knew it was esophageal cancer, adenocarcinoma, there were still a lot of questions, and there wasn't really a great roadmap or a game plan because most people had a couple rounds of chemo and didn't make it past that. There was a little bit more information on people that, had lower stage diagnoses, like stage 2. Some of them had radiation and surgery and were able to kind of walk away from it. So I sort of used that as my roadmap, and I decided it was going to become a goal. And as my treatment went forward, and, I had chemo, radiation, eventually surgery, which I was never really supposed to have, but somehow, through a stroke of luck, I got there. I did have a recurrence, and oddly enough, by the time I had that recurrence, I did have more genetic testing done, and things had changed a little bit by then, a few years later, and it was discovered that I was MSI high, so microsatellite stability high, which basically translates into a high tumor mutation burden, and it explained a lot of things about why my metastases were different from my primary. And the other door that it unlocked was the opportunity to try immunotherapy, which for me was not via a clinical trial because it wasn't yet truly being investigated for esophageal cancer. It had been used and tested in melanoma and lung cancers. And thankfully, on a hunch, my physicians were able to gain access through compassionate use. And that's how I got it. And for me, it ended up being the kind of the silver bullet. And now I do believe that as far as roadmaps go, that is on there as an option. People are actually starting with immunotherapy now, and people know more what to expect, and what their chemotherapy options are, what their radiation options might be. Now that includes proton therapy and things like that. And while, you might be hard pressed to find surgery on a roadmap for a stage 4 cancer, no matter what it is, at least information is out there now and you can ask the questions. And I do think it helps you reach those goals. And I'll just say one more thing, which I've shared with you in the past, Kristen, that, the more you can do to make it to the next day, whether that's, ask the world of your oncologist and, really push hard on certain things, or just take care of yourself and eat well and, exercise to the extent you can. If you make it to the next day and the next day and the day after that, eventually time gives science a chance to catch up with the cancer. And if you're lucky, like me, sometimes you can really outrun it. But you got to hang in there. You can't give up too soon. Science is moving fast, and sometimes it really does work.
Yeah. Thank you, Dana.
I wanted to add to Dana's point, it's really, really important as a patient to take good care of yourself, to exercise, to make sure you're eating, even if you're not hungry. If the nutritionist says you need to drink these 3 boosts a day, they may taste bad, but just keep your weight up, keep healthy, stay active, get out of the house. The patients who are able to take good care of themselves are in a better shape to receive whatever next therapy is, even if the first one doesn't work. But if you're in bed all day, really down and out, I know it's hard to stay positive with all the bad news that comes forward, but if you can take good care of yourself, stay positive, stay active, your body's more receptive to receiving the treatment, and it tends to work better in patients who are stronger and in better shape. So that's a very, very, very important point that Dana makes.
Yeah, and it's really great to hear. I think it's always good for the practitioner, the doctors, to also remind patients of those other pieces, not just the treatment that you're talking about and the side effects, but also all of those other pieces, including, support for mental health during your treatment, because it is extremely difficult and challenging. It's hard to keep, that up. So having all of those tools, nutrition, exercise, mental health support, family support, community support, all of this is so critical. And it's great to hear, you say that, Dana, as the patient, and then also to hear you say that as the doctor, to, working together, reminding each other of those pieces. They're really so important. So thank you both for that. And, I just think all of these perspectives are so important, and I know how much it helps patients to hear this. We're so grateful that you guys are both here today. We had a couple of questions come in. I just wanted to see if we do have a little bit of time. So I just wanted to see if maybe we could get a few of these in. One was wondering about how to spread awareness for rare cancer. And I think, Rare Cancer Day is today. This is a perfect day to spread awareness. There's lots of ways to get involved, and they are also on our website for the Rare Cancer Day, just opportunities. But Dana, if you want to talk a little bit about, just how to get involved and spread awareness for someone's specific rare cancer that they have.
Yeah, thank you, Kristen. Again, I go back to networking. It's almost like you're looking for a job. Reach out to the advocacy organizations. Sometimes hospitals have, community groups of people that, are have a similar diagnosis. I mean, just share. In this situation, sharing can do so much. You never know who someone else might know and where they were treated. And it can really be so beneficial. So, and then also you can check out, those online communities if you're inclined. There are a lot of Facebook communities too, especially for the more rare diseases, because there are so few people. And I would say get involved too, because the more you get involved, the more you participate, the more you learn, and it allows you to advocate for yourself and others better.
Thank you. And we had another question here about, and this might be a little bit more about rare cancers in general, like what is a rare cancer? But we had someone ask, why is it stated that cholangiocarcinoma is rare, or you could use any rare cancer here. This person asked about cholangiocarcinoma, yet more and more I hear about people with this cancer at all ages. So I think the question is just about what is a rare cancer, like what constitutes a rare cancer, and maybe why, when it doesn't seem rare, is it considered rare? I don't know if anyone wants to take that one.
I think that the rare cancer definition I think it's on your website. It's however many, it's the percentage that it's available in the population. That's why it's called. A lot of these cancers that are rare, if you think about rare tumors, even though individually they don't constitute a lot of tumors, collectively it's 20 to 25% of the cancers if you put them all together. And I think some of the rare tumors which have good advocacy, good support groups, the word is getting out there. We have noticed in the general population, a lot of these cancers that previously we only saw in really old people are now being seen in younger and younger patients. And some of them may be a little more aggressive. I don't have a great answer for why we're seeing them in younger and younger patients. That's an area of active research we're looking into. But I think many of the rare tumors, we're just, they're getting the word out there. And that's why you're hearing about it more and more, which is a good thing. We want to get the word out there so that you can do more research. There's more information. Physicians, when someone with a rare tumor comes in, has resources to better manage it. along with the second opinions the patient's going to get. I think that's how I'd answer that one.
Yeah, no, I think that's so true. I mean, the more it's out there, the more you start to hear about it too. So it's like a circle. So that's really helpful. I think there's one more. I don't think we have any others that have come in that I've seen, unless I'm missing any. I just want to double check. But I had one that was asking about, it's so important for someone with a rare cancer to be able to access care from a specialist. And unfortunately, some insurance companies are limiting people's access. Are there any suggestions about how patients can overcome this barrier? This is something that I think maybe, if either of you have any suggestions, please jump in. I think what I'll say about this one is that this is a very good question. Extremely difficult challenge, and is something that we actually want to address in a future webinar. So to look out for this, because this is on our list of future topics. So stay tuned for that.
I think you go ahead, Dana.
Okay, well, I'm sure we have different perspectives, which is great. So I also had trouble with insurance. It started with just like the imaging test that, they didn't cover, like the PET scan versus the CT scan. And I was able to find a patient nurse navigator at my insurance company. It took a lot of work, but I did find that person and explained my situation. I had my physicians write a note to kind of defend my position because, they wanted the imaging as much as I did, but sometimes it just wasn't covered at certain intervals. Yet we did sort of feel like it would be helpful. So find that navigator, become best friends with them, and that might help. I still talk to mine. In fact, I sent her Christmas cards. I think when they really understand what you are going through, and you're not just another number, it does help, especially in the rare space, because there aren't necessarily, tried and true pathways. Sometimes you have to veer off of them to take advantage of opportunities.
Yes, I think I would add that it can be difficult working with insurance to get second opinions and to get tests that are not quite the standard. A lot of times for example, with the PET scan, they're like, oh, you need a peer-to-peer. So I have to call another doctor and I'll wait for them to call me back. But oftentimes, if I can prove that the scan that we got does not show the cancer well, I can get that paid for. So there are little tricks that you have which can get things paid for. Sometimes they want one test first. They want the CAT scan. If you say CAT scan's not quite adequate, then they'll let you get the next test. For the second opinions, a lot of my patients have to pay out of pocket if the insurance doesn't. Once in a while, if it's something very rare and I can really attest to the fact we do not have the expertise in our institution, then I can negotiate with insurance, give them a call, write a letter, just say we don't see this here. And a lot of times that will get approved, but not always. So it is a challenge getting insurance to pay for different things. You do need a doctor who's willing to go the extra mile for you to make those calls, because those peer-to-peers, they often want to talk to you. It's 5 or 6 p.m. end of the day, or the 7 a.m. call, because they're on the East Coast and I'm on the West Coast. But I try to make those calls if I think it has a good chance of helping my patient out. So I think if you have the funds to get the second opinions, it's probably faster to get in if you pay out of pocket, but not everyone has the funds to pay $600 or $700 for every second opinion. So if you have some time, if you can wait a little while to get it through insurance and see what tricks the doctors can do, that's helpful. One thing that I saw, I worked at Kaiser for 3 years for my residency, and I think their rule was that you have to have 2 internal second opinions, and if your doctor says we can't service it here, then you can get a second opinion outside. So looking to see what the tricks within your insurance, the institution are, and getting someone to try to help out with that sometimes can get things paid for when otherwise they wouldn't be.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We have two last questions, and then I think we need to wrap up. But one here is about clinical trials, and I think this will go to you, Dr. Nikanjam. Patients with rare cancers have too few treatment options and lack any standard of care. The opportunity to participate in a clinical trial can be a game changer. Unfortunately, most trials are restrictive to rare cancer subtypes. Is it feasible for trials to consider having a separate cohort for rare cancer patients? Or I guess even, just wondering how is that considered in the process of a clinical trial?
So clinical trials are generally devised by two groups. There's investigator-initiated clinical trials. There's some organizations like TargetCancer foundations, which have their own trials. And then there's industry-sponsored trials where the company's trying to develop their drug. The company-sponsored trials, it's a little harder to get rare tumor subgroups in there. A lot of these companies are just trying to make money. So in all honesty, so getting them to add a rare tumor subgroup may be not feasible. The investigator-initiated trials where a doctor and institution says, I want to study this cancer type, may be a better way to go. And foundations like TargetCancer Foundation, if they want to sponsor something for rare tumors, that can be helpful. There are some trials out there for rare tumors, but in general, there are more trials out there for large groups. I will say that many of the phase 1 trials, first in humans, are general solid tumors. So sometimes one can get on there, but you have to be very careful with the phase 1 because a lot of times it hasn't been tested before in humans, and they don't even know if the drug's going to work. If they're looking at a drug that they think has potential in a new combination, two good drugs being given in combination, phase 1 might be worthwhile. But I usually steer my patients clear of phase 1 early on in treatment. I want to go with the phase 2s or 3s where they have a better chance of getting a drug that has good activity. Rather than just taking anything. So I think it definitely is a challenge getting more trials open for rare tumors. And I think the advocacy groups and more research funding, I think all those things may be feasible in the future for more trials available with rare tumor subgroups. But it is definitely a challenge.
Yeah. Thank you. Last question here, and I'm not sure if I know the answer to this, but you may, Dana, is there any resource that lists all of the patient advocacy groups in the US? Because finding a patient advocacy group for a rare cancer seems like a hit or miss process.
That is a really great question.
Yeah, there should be.
There should be. I think everybody does some of it, sort of. So a couple of ideas. I mean, first, right off the bat, you can Google it, patient advocacy organization for X rare cancer. Sometimes you're going to find more than one. There are a lot of cancers that are not even that common that have several advocacy groups just because they were started by different people in different parts of the country or with different kind of strands of that disease. The other thing you can check out is ASCO. They have connections. That's the American Society of Clinical Oncologists. They partner with a lot of advocacy groups. You can also look at an organization called the Patient Empowerment Network. They have a lot of advocacy partners, but definitely not all. I think they'd like to, but there are so many different shapes and sizes of cancer, rare cancer, and the advocacy groups and who they feel like they serve. And then finally, again, I'll mention the online digital communities. Many of them also have advocacy group partners. So again, you can look at and Inspire. You can look at Patients Like Me. There is, what's the other one? There's a lot of them. You can Google those too. And sometimes you'll find that the same advocacy organizations, are on everybody's website. Some are just, better funded and have the opportunity to share more, but there probably is somebody out there for you.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for giving your time today and for really highlighting, both of your experiences, the experiences from both sides and how, you really can work together to make this rare cancer diagnosis as challenging as it is, something that is more a little easier for the patients and the families and the caregivers. You both do incredible work, and we here at Target Cancer Foundation are so grateful, for both of you. And thank you for joining us today. So, and hope to see everyone again in a future webinar. Please feel free to contact us if you have suggestions for future topics, and go ahead and look at our Rare Cancer Day page and see how you can get involved. So thank you all so much.